Taylor Wright was born on the 24th of April, 1984, into a world that offered little stability from the very beginning. Her earliest years were shaped by hardship, neglect, and emotional absence. By the time she reached her early teenage years, childhood as most people understand it had already slipped away from her. At the age of 13, Taylor was removed from her biological mother's care and placed into the foster care system. For Taylor, this was not a single traumatic moment, but rather the culmination of years of instability. Home had never been a place of safety. It had been unpredictable, fragile, and often painful. Foster care, while intended as protection, became yet another environment where Taylor learned quickly that survival required emotional armor. Those who encountered her during those years often noticed the contradiction she carried. Physically, Taylor appeared small, almost fragile. Her hair was often stringy, her frame slight. But emotionally, she projected toughness well beyond her years. She learned to guard herself closely, to anticipate disappointment, and to rely on her own instincts. Vulnerability for Taylor was dangerous. It was during this period of her life that a chance encounter changed everything. Nancy Murchison lived nearby and first noticed Taylor in a way she later described as instinctive rather than deliberate. There was no dramatic moment, no formal introduction. Nancy simply saw a child who needed help. She would later say she could not explain what compelled her, only that she felt an immediate pull. Nancy approached Taylor and without hesitation offered her a place to stay. "You can come stay with us," she said. With those few words, Taylor's life shifted direction. Moving into Nancy's home marked the first time in years that Taylor experienced consistency. The house was not extravagant, it was not perfect, but it was safe. There were routines. There were meals shared at the table. There was care that did not come with conditions. Nancy had sons of her own, and Taylor became part of that family in a way that went far beyond obligation. For the first time, Taylor had something resembling normalcy. Under Nancy's care, Taylor began to soften. The defensive shell she had built did not disappear, but it no longer needed to be her only protection. Teachers noticed changes. Friends described her as outgoing, friendly, and surprisingly open given what she had endured. She wanted connection. She wanted belonging. Despite the betrayals and instability of her early years, Taylor made a conscious effort to be kind. People who knew her often remarked on that contrast. She could be tough, blunt, and unapologetic, but she was also warm and welcoming. She remembered birthdays. She checked in on people. She made others feel seen. Nancy would later describe Taylor not as a foster child, but as a daughter she chose. As Taylor grew into adulthood, that balance between toughness and empathy became a defining trait. She did not shy away from challenges. In fact, she often leaned into them. She gravitated toward environments that demanded strength, discipline, and resilience. It was in North Carolina that Taylor met Jeff Wright. Jeff was a United States Marine, disciplined and structured, drawn to intensity and challenge. Their relationship did not follow a traditional script. Jeff later recalled that their first date ended with the two of them throwing knives at a dartboard. Taylor lifted weights. She liked competition. She enjoyed pushing limits, both her own and others. Jeff was captivated. Taylor was not only physically strong. She was intelligent, sharp, and fearless. She could match Jeff's competitive nature, and yet she could also walk into a room dressed elegantly, commanding attention without effort. To Jeff, she was different from anyone he had ever met. They married around the year 2007. 3 years later, in the year 2010, Taylor gave birth to their son, Drake. Motherhood transformed her in ways few had anticipated. For Taylor, raising Drake was not simply about love. It was about correction. She was determined that her child would never experience the instability she had endured. Jeff later described Taylor as an ideal mother. She was attentive, protective, and fiercely committed. Drake became the center of her world. Around the same time, Taylor found her professional calling. She joined the Jacksonville Police Department in North Carolina, beginning a career in law enforcement that aligned perfectly with her personality and life experience. She understood adversity. She understood fear. She understood how quickly circumstances could spiral. Taylor served 2 separate periods with the department between the years 2008 and 2013. Her colleagues described her as driven and passionate. She was not passive. She spoke up. She took initiative. Jacksonville Police Deputy Chief Timothy Malfitano would later reflect on her service, saying that Officer Taylor Wright was brave, spirited, and deeply valued. When she returned to the department in 2012, they were glad to have her back. For a time, it appeared that Taylor had achieved what she had always sought: stability. She had a career she believed in, a husband, a child, a sense of purpose. But stability for Taylor had always been fragile. After relocating to Florida, cracks began to form in her marriage. The relationship grew strained. Arguments became more frequent. Resentment built quietly, then all at once. Eventually, during a dinner meant to celebrate their 10th wedding anniversary, Taylor and Jeff made a decision that would change everything. They chose to divorce. What followed was not amicable. It was contentious, emotionally charged, and financially complex. At the center of the conflict was custody of Drake and a significant financial dispute. Before the marriage, Taylor had received a $100,000 settlement following a serious car accident. She believed that money was hers alone. Jeff disagreed. The issue moved into the courtroom, where a judge froze the couple's assets while the matter was resolved. But Taylor, feeling cornered and desperate, made a decision that would have lasting consequences. Despite the court order, she withdrew the money. During a heated confrontation, Jeff contacted law enforcement. Taylor was arrested for battery. Although the charges were later dropped, the arrest followed her. Word spread quickly within law enforcement circles. No department would hire her. In a matter of months, Taylor lost the career she had built, the identity she had embraced, and the professional community she considered family. Without steady employment or secure housing, she faced an impossible choice. She agreed to give Jeff full custody of Drake. The decision devastated her. Despite the distance, Taylor maintained contact with her son every single day. She texted him constantly, offering reassurance, encouragement, and reminders of her love. To Taylor, motherhood did not end with custody papers. As her legal battles continued, a judge ordered Taylor to bring $25,000 to an upcoming hearing scheduled for the 12th of September, 2017. She had 4 days. 4 days to secure money she no longer had easy access to. 4 days to prove she was still fighting. 4 days she would never get. And that is where the story truly begins. By the time September of 2017 arrived, Taylor Wright was operating under an almost unbearable weight of pressure. Her life, once defined by structure and purpose, had narrowed into a single goal: proving she was stable enough, capable enough, and worthy enough to be a full-time presence in her son's life again. She was no longer wearing a badge, but the instincts of a law enforcement officer never left her. Taylor understood systems. She understood deadlines. And she understood consequences. The court order demanding $25,000 loomed over everything. Without it, her chances of regaining custody of Drake would collapse. Taylor refused to accept that outcome. After her divorce was finalized, she took whatever work she could find and eventually rebuilt herself as a private investigator in the Pensacola area. It was not glamorous work, but it allowed her to use her skills, her training, and her instincts. She was good at it, resourceful, persistent, and more importantly, it gave her a path forward. At the same time, Taylor began allowing herself to imagine a future beyond survival. She joined a dating website cautiously at first, and that was where she met Cassandra Waller. Cassandra was a school administrator with Escambia County Public Schools, someone whose life appeared stable, structured, and grounded. Their connection grew quickly. It was not without challenges. Taylor carried emotional scars, and her occasional substance use caused tension. There was also a moment of infidelity early in the relationship that deeply hurt Cassandra. But they worked through it. By late summer, the two women were committed to building a life together. In early September, Taylor began moving her belongings into Cassandra's home. Cassandra later recalled that her entire birthday weekend had been spent helping Taylor move. She did not resent it. She said she was happy, hopeful. It felt like the beginning of something permanent. At the same time, Taylor was preparing for her custody fight. She was gathering documents, lining up work, and doing everything she could to demonstrate stability to the court. She spoke often about Drake. She missed him constantly. Friends said it was impossible to talk to Taylor without her mentioning her son. Through all of this, Taylor wore a distinctive bullet necklace. It was not a fashion statement so much as an extension of her identity. It symbolized strength, survival, and the life she had lived. Those who knew her associated it immediately with who she was. Nancy Murchison, the woman who had taken Taylor in years earlier, remained close. Nancy described Taylor as a loving mother and someone who deeply valued family. To Nancy, Taylor was not just someone she had helped. She was family, a daughter in every way that mattered. Unbeknownst to Taylor, danger was already moving closer. About a year earlier, Taylor had befriended Ashley MacArthur. Ashley was 40 years old, married, and had once worked as a crime scene technician with the Escambia County Sheriff's Office. She was not a sworn officer and had never attended the police academy, but she had enough experience in law enforcement to understand how investigations worked, how evidence was processed, and how crime scenes were evaluated. That shared background created an instant sense of trust between the two women. Taylor believed Ashley understood her struggles. Ashley presented herself as knowledgeable, supportive, and reliable. They spent time together. They talked. Taylor trusted her. What Taylor did not know was that Ashley's life was quietly unraveling. Ashley was facing severe financial problems. For years, she had been embezzling money from her family's business, Pensacola Automatic Amusement, a company that rented jukeboxes and pool tables to bars across the area. Between the years 2015 and 2017, she skimmed thousands of dollars by falsifying records and underreporting income. At the same time, Ashley was living a double life. She was having an affair with Brandon Batty, the owner of Sticks Billiard Hall. She spent lavishly on him, buying expensive gifts and investing money into his business. She also maintained relationships with other women, including Audrey War, a bartender who worked at Brandon's establishment. Her husband, Zach MacArthur, was unaware of the extent of her actions. Ashley's financial situation grew more desperate by the week. In mid-August, Taylor made a decision she believed was practical. In an effort to keep money out of reach during her legal battle, she divided portions of the withdrawn settlement among people she trusted. On the 16th of August, she gave Ashley $34,000, asking her to keep it safe. Ashley promised she would place the money into a safety deposit box. She never did. Instead, Ashley forged Taylor's signature on a cashier's check and deposited the entire amount into her own personal bank account. The account, which had been nearly empty for months, suddenly surged with funds. Within weeks, the money was gone. It was spent on credit card payments, luxury items, a motorcycle, and expensive gifts for Brandon, including a boat. Taylor had no idea. As the court date approached, Taylor repeatedly asked Ashley to meet her at the bank so she could retrieve the money. Ashley delayed. She made excuses. Something always came up. Time ran out. By early September, Taylor was desperate. On Friday, the 8th of September 2017, Ashley finally agreed to meet. They planned to run errands and go to the bank together. Taylor needed that money. Her future depended on it. That morning, Taylor left Cassandra's home and met Ashley. At around 11:20 in the morning, Taylor sent what would become her final text message to Cassandra. They had been messaging throughout the day, casually, normally. Nothing seemed out of place. Then the messages stopped. As the hours passed, Cassandra grew uneasy. She knew how important the bank visit was. When she tried to reach Taylor, there was no response. She called Ashley. Ashley answered and calmly explained that Taylor could not come to the phone because she was riding a horse on Ashley's family property. She said they had changed plans and decided to go horseback riding instead of going to the bank. Cassandra was immediately concerned. Taylor would not abandon a critical financial obligation to go horseback riding. It made no sense. Ashley assured her Taylor would call later. That call never came. At 7:58 that evening, Cassandra received a text message from Taylor's phone. The message said Taylor would call later, that she was not angry, and that she needed time to think and get her life organized. The wording felt wrong. Close to midnight, another message arrived. It claimed Taylor was okay and needed a few days alone due to stress from the move and court proceedings. It insisted that nothing bad was happening. Cassandra knew instantly that something was terribly wrong. Taylor did not write like that. She did not disappear without explanation, and she would never go days without contacting her son. Terrified, Cassandra reached out to Jeff Wright. Drake had also been trying to reach his mother. He had received no response. Jeff's reaction disturbed her. He warned Cassandra that Taylor might get angry if police were involved and told her to be careful. The warning felt strange, unsettling. As the night wore on, Cassandra called hospitals. Hopping Taylor had been injured and simply unable to respond. There was no trace of her anywhere. Days passed. On the 14th of September, Cassandra reported Taylor missing to the Pensacola Police Department. Officers searched Taylor's residence on Berkeley Drive. Her car sat in the driveway. Her belongings were inside. Her passport and money were untouched. There was no sign she had planned to leave. It was as if Taylor Wright had simply vanished. At first, police publicly stated there was no evidence of foul play. They suggested Taylor may have left on her own, but those closest to her knew that explanation did not fit. Nancy Murchison said her instincts screamed that something was wrong. Taylor would never abandon her son. She would never disappear without a word. And behind the scenes, investigators were beginning to agree. They started looking closely at everyone in Taylor's life. The truth was waiting to surface. As investigators began examining Taylor Wright's disappearance more closely, the initial belief that she had voluntarily walked away quickly lost credibility. Too many details did not align with the life Taylor had been living. She had a court deadline days away. She was actively fighting for custody of her son. She was in the middle of moving into a new home and building a future with Cassandra Waller. Nothing about her behavior suggested she would simply disappear. Detectives started where they always do, with the people closest to her. The first person under scrutiny was Cassandra Waller. She was the one who reported Taylor missing. She was the last person to receive text messages from Taylor's phone, and she was involved in a relationship that had experienced strain in the past. Cassandra did not hesitate. She cooperated fully with investigators from the beginning. She handed over her phone, her laptop, and any electronic device detectives requested. She provided passwords without resistance and answered questions openly. Detective Chad Wilhite later said that Cassandra was not evasive or defensive. She did not attempt to hide anything. Her statements were consistent, and her emotional reactions appeared genuine. During the search of Cassandra's home, investigators found Taylor's identification, her passport, and personal belongings. None of it indicated preparation for a planned disappearance. They also found an uncashed cashier's check worth $19,000, further supporting the idea that Taylor had been preparing for court, not running away. However, one discovery gave detectives pause. They found a revolver inside the home that was missing a bullet. Cassandra explained that she had purchased the firearm after Jeff Wright told her Taylor had become violent during the divorce. She said she wanted to protect herself. Her explanation was documented and examined carefully. Phone records, work schedules, and location data confirmed Cassandra's whereabouts on the day Taylor vanished. There were no inconsistencies, no gaps, no red flags. Cassandra Waller was cleared. Next, investigators turned their attention to Jeff Wright. Jeff had motive. The custody battle had been intense. Taylor had withdrawn money against a court order. The judge had ordered her to return $25,000. Taylor's disappearance removed a major obstacle in Jeff's path to permanent custody of Drake. But motive alone is never enough. Jeff was hundreds of miles away in North Carolina when Taylor disappeared. His military service placed him firmly in another state, with records and witnesses to confirm it. His alibi was airtight. Jeff Wright was ruled out. That left one person: Ashley MacArthur. Ashley was the last confirmed person to see Taylor alive. She had been with her throughout the day on the 8th of September. She had communicated with Cassandra when Taylor stopped responding, and she had offered explanations that, upon closer inspection, did not hold up. On the 15th of September, Ashley sat down for her first formal interview with Pensacola police. She told detectives she had picked Taylor up that morning. They had driven around, run errands, and eventually gone to her family's property in East Milton to ride horses. Ashley claimed they stayed for about an hour before returning to her home around 4:45 in the afternoon. According to Ashley, she went inside briefly, and when she came back outside, Taylor was gone. Ashley said Taylor had called an Uber to go downtown and have a beer. She claimed Taylor had taken her duffel bag containing the $34,000 and left without explanation. As Ashley spoke, detectives noticed something unusual. She did not appear distressed. She did not ask what police were doing to find Taylor. She did not express fear for her safety. Instead, she seemed relaxed, almost playful. Detective Wilhite later described her demeanor as flirtatious, casual, and oddly unconcerned for someone whose close friend was missing. At the time, that observation was noted but not acted upon. The next day, everything changed. On the 16th of September, investigators obtained bank records related to Ashley MacArthur. What they found was impossible to ignore. A cashier's check for $34,000, made out to Taylor Wright, had been deposited into Ashley's personal account on the 16th of August. The signature did not match Taylor's known handwriting. The account history told an even more troubling story. Ashley's account had been near zero or overdrawn for months. Immediately after the deposit, the balance surged. Within weeks, the money was gone. When confronted with the evidence, Ashley altered her story. She claimed Taylor was hiding money to regain custody of her son. She suggested Taylor was going from bank to bank, cashing large checks, and behaving recklessly. The implication was clear. Ashley was attempting to portray Taylor as unstable. Detectives were not convinced. They turned next to Ashley's phone records. Ashley had claimed she and Taylor were horseback riding in East Milton on the 8th of September. Cell phone tower data contradicted that claim. Between late morning and early afternoon, Ashley's phone had pinged off towers near Britt Road in the Cantonment area. That location was miles away from East Milton. Britt Road was where the MacArthur family owned a farm. Even more troubling, Ashley's phone returned to the same area later that afternoon. She had been at the farm multiple times that day. Detectives then examined Ashley's claim that Taylor had called an Uber from her house. Rideshare records told a clear story. There was no Uber, no Lyft, no taxi, no pickup of any kind at Ashley's address that afternoon. The story had been fabricated. Surveillance footage provided further clarity. On the morning of the 8th of September, Ashley was seen driving a silver Ford truck and purchasing a beer at a convenience store. She claimed it was for Taylor. But it was footage from the 9th of September that sent chills through investigators. Ashley was captured on camera at a home improvement store, purchasing fast-setting concrete and potting soil. At the same time, detectives learned Ashley had contacted her cousin on the 8th of September, asking whether he would be present at the family farm that day. He told her he would be attending a funeral and would not be there. Ashley had ensured the property would be empty. As the case continued to unfold, witnesses began coming forward. Brandon Batty, Ashley's romantic partner, admitted to the affair and described the money Ashley had spent on him and his business. Then he revealed something far more disturbing. Ashley had told him they would never find Taylor. Multiple friends provided similar statements. They said Ashley had spoken about harming Taylor days before her disappearance. One witness recalled Ashley discussing poisoning her drink. Another said Ashley talked openly about shooting her instead. The words painted a horrifying picture. By October, investigators had assembled a powerful circumstantial case. They had motive, financial desperation, opportunity, and evidence of planning. What they did not have was a body. And without a body, proving murder would be difficult. Still, detectives moved forward. On the 19th of October, 2017, Ashley was brought back to the police station for another interview, under the pretense of returning her phone. She was read her rights and questioned again. This time, her demeanor had shifted. She appeared tense, guarded. She insisted Taylor was capable of disappearing on her own. She claimed Taylor was tough, always armed, and not easily harmed. While Ashley sat in that interview room, search teams were executing warrants on 3 properties owned by the MacArthur family. One of them was the farm on Britt Road. And what they were about to find would change everything. While Ashley MacArthur sat inside the interview room on the 19th of October, 2017, investigators were moving quietly and deliberately across 3 properties owned by her family. Search warrants had been carefully prepared, and timing was critical. Detectives knew that if Taylor Wright was no longer alive, the truth would likely be buried somewhere Ashley believed no one would ever look. The most significant location was a rural property on Britt Road in Cantonment. It was the same property where Ashley's cell phone had repeatedly pinged on the day Taylor disappeared. The same property Ashley had carefully ensured would be empty, and the same property that, until that moment, had remained largely unexamined. Search teams arrived with trained canine units, including dogs specially trained to detect human remains. The terrain was dense in places, with trees, brush, and uneven ground stretching along the property's perimeter. Officers moved slowly, following the dogs as they worked methodically through the area. Approximately 10 minutes after Ashley was released from her interview, one of the cadaver dogs alerted. The handler stopped immediately. The alert occurred near a fence line in an area that appeared recently disturbed. Officers approached carefully. As they examined the ground, they noticed something protruding from the soil. It was not immediately recognizable, but its shape raised alarm. They began to dig. What emerged was unmistakable. A portion of a human skull was visible, encased in hardened concrete mixed with potting soil. The materials were identical to those Ashley had purchased at the home improvement store just one day after Taylor vanished. Investigators immediately secured the area. A forensic excavation team was brought in to ensure the site was handled properly. As they continued to carefully remove soil and debris, more remains were uncovered. The body had been placed in a shallow grave, wrapped inside a hammock, and concealed beneath concrete in an apparent attempt to prevent detection. As the remains were exposed, detectives noticed a familiar object. A bullet-shaped necklace. Those who knew Taylor Wright recognized it instantly. It was the necklace she wore almost every day, a symbol of her strength, her history, and her identity. For many on the scene, that was the moment when hope gave way to certainty. Lead prosecutor Bridget Jensen later said her gut told her immediately who they had found. The following day, on the 20th of October, dental records confirmed what everyone feared. The remains belonged to Taylor Wright. She had been missing for 41 days. For Taylor's family and loved ones, the confirmation was devastating. Nancy Murchison, who had taken Taylor into her home years earlier, struggled to process the reality. She had clung to hope, believing that Taylor would somehow be found alive. The truth shattered that hope. She wanted answers. She wanted to understand how someone Taylor trusted could betray her in such a horrific way. That same evening, Ashley MacArthur was arrested. She was initially charged with second-degree murder. In November, a grand jury upgraded the charge to first-degree premeditated murder. Bond was set at $1 million. The evidence against Ashley was overwhelming. Financial records showed theft. Cell phone data placed her at the burial site. Surveillance footage showed her purchasing burial materials. Witnesses described her planning the crime in advance. And now, Taylor's remains had been recovered from her family's property. Yet even with all of this, the case faced a major obstacle. There was no murder weapon. There was no DNA linking Ashley directly to the act. The case was entirely circumstantial. Despite the gravity of the charge, in February of 2018, Judge Robert Perry granted Ashley pretrial release. Her bond was reduced to $400,000, and she was placed on GPS monitoring. She was ordered to live at her mother's home in Gulf Breeze. The decision shocked Taylor's loved ones. To them, it felt as though justice had already begun to fail. While awaiting trial for Taylor's murder, Ashley faced separate charges related to her financial crimes. In January of 2019, she was convicted of racketeering and organized fraud for embezzling money from her family's business. On the 21st of February, 2019, she was sentenced to 7 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of probation. She was taken into custody immediately. Prosecutor Bridget Jensen was concerned. She had just watched a jury convict Ashley on financial charges, but acquit her on an arson count that relied heavily on circumstantial evidence. The murder case was also circumstantial. There was still no physical evidence directly tying Ashley to the act itself. The question loomed: would it be enough? By August of 2019, Ashley MacArthur stood trial for the murder of Taylor Wright. In opening statements, the prosecution laid out a clear narrative. Ashley had a motive. She had stolen $34,000 and spent it. Taylor was demanding that money back. Ashley was desperate. She planned the crime, carried it out, and then attempted to cover it up with lies, concrete, and potting soil. The defense argued Ashley came from wealth and had no need for money. They claimed she suffered from physical limitations that would make such a crime impossible. Prosecutors countered with photographs and videos showing Ashley scuba diving, fishing, horseback riding, and engaging in physically demanding activities. Witness after witness took the stand. Brandon Batty testified about the affair and the money Ashley spent on him. Friends described Ashley discussing ways to kill Taylor. One witness testified that Ashley said the world would be better without Taylor. Another recalled Ashley asking how much substance would be required to cause an overdose. Zach MacArthur, Ashley's husband, was also called to testify. When asked if his wife was capable of murder, he hesitated. He said he could not see her doing something like that, describing her as intelligent. He then made a remark that lingered in the courtroom, calling it sloppy. After 4 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 3 hours. They returned with a verdict: guilty of first-degree, premeditated murder with a firearm. The courtroom erupted. Some wept, others sat frozen in disbelief. The judge sentenced Ashley MacArthur to life in prison, with a mandatory minimum of 25 years before eligibility for parole. She was also sentenced to an additional life term related to racketeering and fraud, ensuring she would remain incarcerated even if the murder conviction were overturned. Ashley showed no visible emotion, no apology, no remorse. For Taylor's loved ones, the verdict brought relief but not closure. Justice had been served, but nothing could bring Taylor back, and the damage left behind would echo for years. In the days following the verdict, the weight of what had been revealed settled heavily over everyone connected to Taylor Wright's life. The courtroom drama had ended, but the consequences of Ashley MacArthur's actions stretched far beyond the walls of the courthouse. For Taylor's family and friends, the guilty verdict confirmed what their hearts had already known. Still, knowing the truth did not make living with it any easier. Nancy Mutchison, the woman who had taken Taylor in when she was still a frightened teenager, struggled deeply with the loss. She described feeling as though something irreplaceable had been stolen from her. Taylor had not just been someone she helped. She had been a daughter in every meaningful sense. Nancy spoke openly about the pain of watching Taylor fight her way out of hardship, only to have her life taken by someone she trusted. Nancy said that in so many ways she felt robbed of future memories, robbed of watching Taylor grow older, robbed of seeing her reclaim her role as a mother to Drake. That loss, she said, would never fade. Cassandra Waller faced a different kind of grief. For her, the loss of Taylor was compounded by betrayal. She had opened her home, her life, and her future to someone she loved deeply. She had trusted Ashley as a friend, never imagining that the same person who comforted her during the search was responsible for the disappearance itself. Cassandra later said the most frightening part was how convincing Ashley had been. She spoke with concern. She offered reassurance. She pretended to help search. All the while, she already knew exactly where Taylor was. That realization haunted Cassandra long after the trial ended. In public statements, Cassandra described Taylor as outgoing, kind, and deeply loving. She said Taylor made an effort with everyone she met, even when life had given her so many reasons not to. Cassandra emphasized that Taylor had been trying to do the right thing. She was rebuilding her life. She was working. She was preparing for court. She was fighting to be a mother again. Taylor was not running away. She was moving forward. For Drake, the impact was life-altering. He was still a child when his mother vanished, old enough to understand that something was wrong but too young to fully grasp the permanence of loss. He had tried to reach her. He had waited for replies that never came. Eventually, the truth reached him in the hardest way possible. Jeff Wright raised his son in North Carolina, providing stability and structure, but no amount of care could replace a mother's presence. Taylor's absence became a constant, quiet ache. Milestones passed without her. Birthdays, school achievements, moments she had dreamed of being part of. Taylor's story became more than a criminal case. It became a cautionary tale about trust, desperation, and betrayal. She had survived foster care. She had survived a difficult marriage. She had survived the loss of her career. What she could not survive was the greed of someone she believed was her friend. In April of 2021, Ashley MacArthur filed an appeal, arguing that the evidence against her had been circumstantial and insufficient. The Florida Court of Appeal reviewed the case carefully. They denied the appeal. The conviction stood. Ashley remains incarcerated, serving a life sentence. She will not be eligible for parole until at least the year 2044. Even then, her additional life sentence related to fraud ensures she will likely spend the rest of her life behind bars. Throughout the years, Taylor's bullet necklace has taken on new meaning. What once symbolized toughness and survival has become a symbol of remembrance. It represents who Taylor was at her core: strong, resilient, unapologetically herself. Those who loved her speak of her often. They share stories. They remember her laugh. They remember her determination. They remember her love for her son above all else. Taylor Wright's life was defined not by how it ended, but by how fiercely she fought to overcome the odds stacked against her from the very beginning. Her murder was the ultimate betrayal. A trusted friend stole her money, lied to her face, and when confronted, chose to silence her forever. Ashley forged Taylor's signature, spent her savings, and then attempted to erase her existence with concrete and lies. For 41 days, Taylor's loved ones searched, hoped, and prayed, unaware that the truth lay buried on a quiet piece of land. Justice came, but it came too late. Taylor could not be brought back. What remains is memory, legacy, and the responsibility to remember. And that responsibility extends beyond her family. Taylor Wright's story forces an uncomfortable reflection on how fragile trust can be, and how devastating its betrayal truly is. She had spent her life learning how to protect herself from obvious threats. She knew danger. She had trained for it. What she could not prepare for was the quiet threat that came disguised as friendship. In the final weeks of her life, Taylor was doing everything right. She was working. She was planning. She was preparing for court. She was moving into a new home. She was envisioning a future where she could once again tuck her son into bed each night. That future was stolen not by chance, but by deliberate, calculated choices made by someone she believed she could rely on. The investigation into Taylor's disappearance demonstrated the power of persistence. At first, her case was treated as a voluntary absence. It was the insistence of those who knew her best that kept pressure on investigators. It was Cassandra's refusal to accept silence. It was Nancy's unwavering belief that something was wrong. And it was the careful, methodical work of detectives that ultimately revealed the truth. There was no confession. There was no dramatic moment of remorse. There was evidence, patterns, and the slow unraveling of lies. Cell phone records contradicted alibis. Financial documents exposed desperation. Surveillance footage revealed preparation. Witness testimony painted a chilling picture of intent. And finally, a buried truth emerged from beneath concrete and soil. Taylor Wright became more than a missing person. She became a reminder that circumstantial evidence, when layered carefully and truthfully, can speak louder than a single piece of physical proof. In court, the jury saw what Ashley MacArthur tried to hide. They saw motive, they saw opportunity, they saw planning, and they saw a complete absence of accountability. In just a few hours of deliberation, they delivered a verdict that reflected the weight of what had been done. Life in prison, a sentence that acknowledges the permanence of Taylor's loss. For those left behind, healing has not been linear. Grief does not follow rules or timelines. Some days are quieter than others. Some memories bring comfort, others bring pain, but Taylor is not forgotten. She is remembered as a survivor of foster care who refused to let her past define her future, as a law enforcement officer who served her community, as a mother who loved her son fiercely, as a partner who believed in second chances, and as a woman whose strength never wavered, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. Drake grows older now, carrying memories of his mother shaped by stories, photographs, and the love she left behind. He grows up knowing that she fought for him until the very end. And for those who hear Taylor's story, there is a responsibility to remember her not just as a victim, but as a person. A person who mattered. This is why cases like Taylor Wright's are told, not for spectacle, not for fear, but for truth, accountability, and remembrance. On behalf of those who loved her, thank you for listening. If this story moved you, like this video, leave a comment and hit the subscribe button so you can continue to support justice-focused storytelling here on Forensic True Cases. Please do not forget Taylor